afternoon, good night, wherever you are. This is Thomas Sheridan on the Velocity of Now. I'm delighted to have you here. It's Lunasa 2020, the midpoint of the year. So to all of you around the world, Shona Lunasa, or Lamas, if you're in the English-speaking world or the Anglo-Saxon world. And you're listening to the Velocity of Now with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan. My website is www.mossuponstones.com, and all the details you need regarding contacting me, supporting me, following me, reading me, about me are down in the description box below this video. I hope you're all keeping well. I thank you for all the lovely feedback I've been getting lately regarding not only the VON relaunch broadcasts, but also the vlogs I've been making during the week. We are indeed living in very strange times, and here we are at the halfway point of the year. And what a year 2020 has been. We'll certainly look back on this with a sense of amazement, if not foreboding, dread and wonder. Here we are at the halfway point. And what is to happen for the remainder of the year is the events with the corona lockdown that's happened up until this point to be something of a fulcrum that will push its weight into the remainder of 2020. It's hard to say, but we're definitely living in an age of epics. And we're almost certainly living in an age that's in flux, it's changing. I said it before, and I'll say it again, we are living in the latter decades of the Middle Ages come around once again, when the same despicable families in power are treating the peasantry, that's you and me by the way, as if we're disposable subhumans. I suggest you watch Robert Corman's version of The Mask of the Red Death, starring Vincent Price, and see how Prince Prospero treats his subjects, and how the aristocrats who are hiding inside this castle in northern Italy near Verona during a time of plague locked themselves indoors and sacrificed the peasantry to the gods of death. And we're seeing the same thing today. One half of the peasantry wants to bash down the gates of Prince Prospero's castle and be brought safely inside. It's really quite remarkable how this is all being reflected in today. Within the story of The Mask of the Red Death, Prospero and his cronies are all perverts who involve themselves in paedophilia. In the Roger Corman version, they used midgets to demonstrate children, but there's quite a disturbing scene in it where they're discussing the sexual abilities of a female dwarf, and it's clear that it's an allegory for paedophilia among the elites in the establishment. And here we are again in 2020 with the whole Epstein's Island thing breaking out, and we're finding about just how despicable and degrading these people are. It's like the joke meme I saw last week. The same people who are friends of Epstein are the same ones telling me to wear a mask. This is one of the beauties of paganism and seeing the world in allegory and archetypes, in that you're able to see a movie about a book written by Edgar Allan Poe and set in Victorian times that's really about today. It's like they said, all the great science fiction is not about the future, it's about now. It's the same with all the great horror writing. It's not about the future, it's about now, or not about the past, it's about now. The Mask of the Red Death, The Mask of the Corona Death. It's really remarkable how the synchronicities and synchromistic concepts bounce back and forth. When you observe culture, you think about culture, and you see for archetypal reflectors within the present. It's about learning how to see, but learning how to see in metaphorical, allegorical, and mythological ways. And 2020 vision indeed. We're getting 2020 vision during 2020. It's quite remarkable. I see yesterday that Gemma O'Doherty lost her Twitter account. And this is hardly surprising. I wouldn't agree with a lot of what she says, and I wouldn't be into her methods and stuff, but as a believer in free speech, you have to keep dialogue and discourse going, and this is one of the trademarks of the lefties. The lefties and the liberals despise free speech. They absolutely hate it with a passion. Now, there was a time in the past where the conservatives were like that, during the time of McCarthyism and so on. See, this is why I don't take either the conservative or the left-wing side or the liberal side or whatever, because the infection, quote-unquote, bounces from one side to the other. It's cross-spectrum, and it moves across the bandwidth of both political extremes, and it will infect them on both sides in time, over time, and they'll both get their delve into insanity in due course, and it's currently on the left-hand side. I remember during the 1980s, late 1980s, there was the whole PMRC, the Parents Music Resource Committee, led by Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife. Basically a bunch of Washington housewives who decided what children should listen to and not listen to, and they were putting stickers on records. And it was absolutely, explicit lyrics, this kind of thing. And it was really triggered by a band called Two Live Crew, who were a hip-hop band, who wrote these almost like it was like Sid the Sexist in the Ghetto lyrics, and they were more funny than offensive, just like Sid the Sexist is funny and not offensive. That's how I felt when I listened to the two live crew stuff. I was laughing my head off. It was so deliberately stupid in its own kind of antagonistic way. But I remember watching the MTV Awards that year, and that actor, I think Eric Bogosian was his name, he was in that movie Talk Radio where he played a kind of Howard Stern character. And he comes on stage and he talks about, he quotes like the Bill of Rights, whatever, from the American Constitution, and freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And then he goes, and now here's my friends, Two Live Crew, and then they come on stage and they do their stupid rapping thing. And it was so ridiculous. It was like it was a manifesto on the necessity of free speech, even if it offends. And yet, what the left were indulging in then, a hip-hop band having incredibly sexist and misogynistic lyrics, they're totally against these days. They hide the likes of them supporting Two Live Crew like a family secret, You would have had that in all the music press, they would have been all like, oh, we must support Two Live Crew, if people find those lyrics offensive, it's because, they have to deal with freedom of speech. The exact same people that they are like, 25 years ago telling a joke about rednecks, he used the N-word, he must never work again. The same people. They don't have any foundation to their existence. Their psychic integration is poor, and therefore it's subject to, as I said yesterday on a vlog, the purposeful meanderings of the dogmatic condition. Your leaders set a condition down, This is you, this is what you are, this is what you believe in. Believe it. And then you believe it and follow it, and then one day they say, that doesn't exist anymore. It now means this. So really interesting stuff. Really interesting insights into these people. What we're seeing is a lack of a spiritual dimension to everything. And watching the reaction, I looked around Twitter at the reaction to people, these like idiots, delighted that Chemo Authority's count has been cancelled. You get the usual sort of, hermaphroditic blobs who work in the civil service all jumping up and down and dancing, because no one will ever love them. And so therefore they have to embark upon a life of hatred. But the hatred is what really got to me. It was visceral. This is a hatred of someone who you don't know personally, who never did anything to you personally, is a very bad way to live your life, because what you do is you deplete your life energy in order to feed their charisma. How about that for a dose of irony? And you can look at their TikTok pages, and you look at your Twitter pages, and you look at their photographs, and you see the same spiritual vacuum, the same spiritual void that's not there. It's like they've been fed a spiritual gruel. Gruel was a type of food, if you could call it that was given to prisoners and orphans and people in institutions, and it was just enough sustenance to keep them alive. It'd be mostly carbohydrates. It'd be things like barley, boiled barley, or cornmeal in America, and then they might put a bit of pork fat, or something with a tiny amount of protein, a bit of salt to give them some kind of minerals, a bit of pepper, and to help them fight infection. And it kept them alive, but it didn't give them enough strength to riot or escape from prison. More importantly, it made their brains sluggish. It made their brains sluggish so they couldn't really think. And we're living in the age of supergruel. And you see it when someone's you watch YouTube and someone's interviewing these young progressive woke types, and they say, do you think socialism would be good for America? Yes, I do. Why? I just think it would. Yes, but can you tell us what specifically is about socialism that would make it work better in America? Well, I don't really know that much about it. Yeah, she's sitting there with a sign in her hand, a Che Guevara t-shirt, and demanding socialism. She's been fed gruel. Not enough nutrition in the food, not enough intellectual nutrition in colleges and universities, and not enough spiritual nutrition in life. And so she can't articulate in the same way a prisoner in a Victorian workhouse, however you'd have them, couldn't articulate the means to escape or get out. The brain receives no fats, so therefore it has no electrical structure and barely enough minerals, just the salt really. And they can't cognitively process thoughts. They don't know what they believe in. They just know they have to believe in it because it was given to them. And you'll always see it's the same way. You'll always see it. It starts out polite enough, and you'll ask them like, why do you hate Trump? Because he's a fascist. Okay, what has he done that's fascist? He just is. He hates women. Okay, could you explain give me an example of he hates women? Well, he said about grabbing a woman by the pussy. Yeah, he said that 9 years ago. Lots of men say things like that in their life, and it was off camera. And it was clearly a figure of speech. He wasn't really meaning it. Well, he's a racist. Okay, could you show me how he's a racist? He just is. And then you can see them actually getting more and more angry to the point where they scream. It almost becomes like an autistic breakdown. Again, they're on the gruel life. And they all walk hand in hand through their gruel life. It's really what it's like, yeah. And they can't think. And that's exactly what they want. They want it, just like H.G. Wells in The Time Machine. The Eloi, The Eli they just can't think. They live on a vegan diet. Everything is provided for them. They don't actually have to work. They don't have any knowledge. And they're food ultimately for the Molochs who are under the ground. And H.G. Wells, being a big-time member of the Fabian Society and a socialist, was very much one of the archetypes of the world we live in today. The likes of him and George Bernard Shaw. They played a huge part in it. Gruel life. Yeah, gruel life. And it varies between ignorance and hatred. On one side, it's self-righteous ignorance. On the other side, it's hatred. And they cannot have a discussion or a debate. They are just conditioned responses. A few amino acids, proteins, electrolytes, and minerals that somehow become locomotory, and it's able to repeat mantras, but if you ask them what these things mean, they can't tell you. It's funny how when you shift your perception in a certain direction, how something that didn't really have a particular meaning or seemed to have a surface level engagement with your consciousness suddenly changes into something completely different and becomes laughable. There was a famous Irish folk singer here called Christy Moore, and he's still going, and he doesn't really write songs except stupid, like, Ernie the Fastest Milkman in the West type songs, and he covers other people's songs. Quite a nice voice and a good singer. He's done some nice trad stuff with Planksty. I can't knock him for that. But he had a song called Viva la Quinta Bregada, and it was about the International Brigade in the Spanish Civil War. Viva la Quinta Bregada. Quite a nice song melody-wise, but it's all about these Irish fellas, and there wasn't only Irish, there was Scots and English and others who went into the Spanish Civil War to fight on behalf of the socialists for the International Brigade against fascism, Franco's Republican government. And the lyrics are stupid when you listen to them now. The word came from Minute, meaning where the Irish bishops are. Support the Nazis. The men in Clotty failed once again. And I always remember some guy singing that in the pub going, the men in Clotty failed once again. Like it was some kind of, he's some great orator. When you start looking into the history of these are the good guys, as they sailed under the swastika to Spain, for starters, these guys weren't fighting for the Nazis. They were fighting against Bolsheviks. And those ones were fighting for Bolsheviks. The ones who fought against them, O'Duffy and the rest of what they call the blue shirts, they were actually fighting against communism, Bolshevism, which was a very evil force in the world, as bad as National Socialism. They're the same thing anyway. One is just nationally focused and the other one is communistically focused and, community focused. It's all the same horrible thing. And so you had basically, the Spanish Civil War could be looked upon as, two different flies fighting over a dog turd. I don't mean to put it in Spain or anything like that. I'm talking about the philosophical aspects of it. And when you look into the history of the International Brigade, these heroes that he sings about who went to Spain to fight the fascism, they were actually, the International Brigade was basically under the direct control of the NKVD. They were a Stalinist death squad. And rather than fight great battles against the fascists, what they really did was do things like murder anarchists and mainstream socialists. That was their job, was to murder and assassinate people. Death squads. So the International Brigade were really, it wasn't that they were on a hillside fighting against the Nazis. It should be really like, the men, the in Viva la Quinta Bregada, we took the people out into the olive fields. We shot them all one by one because they weren't good Bolsheviks. let's bury them in a lime pit tonight. That's literally what they were doing. They were a Stalinist death squad. The International Brigade was a Stalinist death squad, directly under the control of the NKVD, which was the precursor of the KGB, but a vicious, brutal, quasi-militaristic force that killed millions all over the Soviet Unions and all across Eastern Europe and in Spain as well. And that's basically what their job was, to murder people who were moderate socialists, and to murder anarchists. That was always, anarchists are like the pagans of political philosophy. They're the most dangerous of all because they don't have a hard, fast constitution that the establishment can hide behind. And when you see that, you think of that song now, you think how stupid it is. It's typical lefty mentality, not educated. He only wants to sing about his heroes, and he doesn't. The full implications. It was the same thing. Like the socialists and the communists do not want to take responsibility for the Bolsheviks and the Stalinist purges. Oh, that wasn't really communism. Could you imagine if the same people, if other people turned around and said, someone said, well, what about the Nazis when they killed all the Jews? Oh, well, that wasn't real National Socialism. Yet the lefties got away with using that excuse exactly, just like that. Pol Pot, that wasn't real communism. Yeah, if people who are on the other side turn around and says, the Warsaw Ghetto, come on, that wasn't real National Socialism. And yet the communists and the socialists use that with a straight face. They use that with they're not even willing to admit their failures or their dark. They won't say, okay, communism has led to 120 million deaths in the last 100 years or so. It wasn't real communism. My sociology professor told me that if we try communism this time, it'll work. Terrifying. And that's because they're all full of gruel. Brains of mush. They don't want to think. They like having their thinking for them done. All they want is the platitude and the echo chamber of woke progressiveness. I know I talk about this a fair bit, and I'm not a political person. I don't care about the left. I don't care about the right. I study it as a form of psychic weather. That's how you should do it as well. And I just watch it for what it is. It's like bird watching or train spotting. I watch it and it fascinates me, but I have no emotional connection to either side of it. And I never will. And, yesterday or 2 days ago in Croke Park in Dublin, they had that Eid festival on the grass pitch at a field where 31 Irish people in 1920 were murdered by the British Army. Civilians just watching a sporting game. And there was a protest outside by this group called themselves the Irish National Party. And they're holding up a banner saying, "Keep Ireland Catholic." Oh no. You will not win. You don't have a chance. There are lots of people out there who don't like progressive wokeness, political correctness, cultural Marxism. What they don't want to go back to the Holy Catholic Ireland either. They do not want to go back to that. And that's what you're offering them. And you won't have a chance. So, there's no difference between your rosary beads and a Muslim's beads. There's no difference. They're both from the Middle East. They're both not Irish. Sorry, Nationalist Party. And, I respect you. You're allowed to have a party. Don't think it should be banned. I think you should be allowed to have your say, and allowed to have your feelings expressed, and I support that, but it's not for me. It's not for me. I'm not a nationalist, really. I'm not. Because the definitions of that can be changed as well. For instance, like you look at republicanism, right? You'd have members of Sinn Féin. Well, what was Sinn Féin? I don't know. Sinn Féin now is, fellas in tutus, But like when Sinn Féin was, say, the Gerry Adams, Martin McGuinness Sinn Féin, they'd have you believe that, like, Finn McCool and Cuchulainn, Queen Maeve, were on the IRA Army, Council. Republicanism as a system has only existed 200 years. That's all. It's really not much older than unionism, ironically. And the Irish identity is not Republican. The Irish identity is Irish. Okay, it's Celtic, it's Gaelic, mostly Gaelic. Whatever Celtic is, we still don't fully know. But this supersedes nationalism. I could be, like I said, I'm not really bothered if Ireland was 1/5 Muslim and 1/5 Chinese and 1/5 black. I wouldn't have a problem with that. No bother at all. I'm still Irish. I'm here. It's my land. I still have that culture inside me. I don't care. Just because someone new is coming in doesn't mean they're taking it away from me. I don't care what the officialdom says about that. They can say whatever they want. They can scrap up, do anything they want. They won't change it for me. People will find the truth in the end, and everyone will find their own truth eventually. And see, this is why I'm not hung up on this thing of, like, patriotism in that way. To me, it's really about culture, and it's a spiritual identity. And, again, like I said yesterday, I'm not a chauvinist about it. I don't think being Irish makes me better than anyone else, any other race or any other people. A human race, we're all equals, and that's how I see it. However, each one of our individual cultures is extremely precious. Extremely precious. I watched a documentary about the Appalachian people in America, and it would be a great tragedy to lose that. They have a wonderful culture that developed out of the Scots-Irish, Ulster-Scots thing about 300 years ago, travelling down the Appalachians. And basically these were a formidable people that came from Ulster, originally from Scotland. And then they left Ireland during the Confederacy Wars, sectarianism problems, and made their way to America and settled along the Appalachians, down the Shenandoah Valley, all the way down to Georgia. And they brought their songs and their stories and their music and their folklore, and they created things like rock and roll. And it's just an incredible story. It's just incredible. And that's a beautiful, magical thing. And this is the glory of culture, no matter what it is, no matter where it comes from. It is the ultimate form of spirituality in many ways. When it's left uncorrupted, it will develop into the most beautiful things. From a Protestant Scots-Irish fiddler getting off the ship in New York, hopping on a stagecoach to the Allegheny Mountains, and then finding his way down, playing his fiddle, from that all the way to Elvis Presley's first album. It's remarkable. It's beautiful. But that's because it happens organically. The problem is today we have our culture being made for us, created for us, formalized for us. And we're told that beauty is not important. This whole thing of the gaslighting of the modern person really began in the art galleries. You go to art galleries all over the world, public art galleries, they all have the same old garbage in them. And that's because they want to destroy concepts of beauty. They don't want you to see something as beautiful that is beautiful. They don't want you to know beauty. They want you to see only sterile coldness. If you want an insight into the elites, you've got two things, right? The Turner Prize for Modern Art and Epstein's Island. You put the Turner Prize and Epstein's Island together, and you have the establishment that are running this world today. That's what's inside them. They're driven by perversion, and they don't know what beauty is. And they want to rob beauty from the rest of us. They want to, because there's no song in their heart, they want the song in our heart to be eternally off key. So we don't notice just how twisted they are and just how deranged they are. This is not a political statement. This is a spiritual statement. This is a cultural statement. This is a social statement, but it's not a political one. I don't do politics. I'm sans politics. I've transcended that world. I've no interest in it. Let them go play their own political thing. My concern now is with the survival of Western culture, and not in a sense where I'm fighting for it like someone like the BNP in England. I can't stand the likes of Tommy Robinson and people like that. There's something incredibly toxic about them, and they are racist. They absolutely are. And what I want is memory. I want the folk tradition to survive. I want stories passed on. I want parents to tell their children there was a different time. There was a different world than what MTV is offering, than what CNN is offering, than what the BBC is offering. There was something else. This is how it survives. You can write it down, you can talk about it, but what it really have to do is to remember. And that's really what everything is. It's remembering who we are. Remembering what we are as a species and what we are as a people. Like when these immigrants come over here, people think they have it easy, but they don't really. They're disconnected from someone from Nigeria. I'm not saying this because they don't, they're not wanted here. It's more like someone from Nigeria in Ireland it should be in Nigeria because that's their homeland. That's their soul. That's the homeland. And you see that longing in Irish Americans. Irish Americans and many hyphenated Americans know that there's something missing in them. You see it especially with Italian Americans. That the diaspora isn't enough. That there's a longing, a disconnect from the home, a disconnect from the fertile ground from which their ancestors sprung. And these people from Nigeria and other parts of the world, in Ireland and other countries in Europe, they'll always have that longing inside them. And people say, oh, well, why can't they assimilate? Well, it's very easy for you to say, why can't they assimilate? But do you ever think that maybe they can't? Maybe they're not able to, like literally, not because there's anything wrong with them, but because they long for home deep down inside. And then this leads to other kinds of behavioural problems. You look at the reputation of the Irish in America when they first went there. It's awful. You've seen films like Gangs of New York. Awful. The Irish were the lowest of the low. But the Italians got the same. And even the Germans got the same when they went to America. A lot of this has to do with, there are people here, they're stuck. When I went to America, I think the most important thing that I ever did was to not be Irish. I made a distinct choice not to be a paddy in America. I didn't hang out, and I went a few times, but I didn't become part of an Irish scene. I wanted to embrace what America had to offer, but I still had a longing for home. I didn't want what paddies in America had to offer. It didn't interest me. Irish America didn't interest me. I had a longing for home, even though I did very well there. Had an amazing time. There was nothing wrong with America. There was something wrong with me. I was away from home. And the umbilical cord can't fully be cut over generations. And no one ever talks about these things. And it's always a thing like, oh, these immigrants here taking our jobs, blah, blah, all these immigrants here. But no one ever talks about the downside of their story and the repercussions that will affect generations of them. Again, they're not the problem. See, one of the reasons the Irish upper middle class all love immigration is because a lot of them are involved. Here's the reason why the Irish upper class love immigration to this country, and in your country as well, because most of the Irish middle class, they're like pro-immigration, pro-woke, work for the government, or they're in trade unions and they've got jobs for life and they're protected. And they don't mind because the immigrants will come over and they'll take jobs from the private sector, local indigenous workers, Irish workers, and lower wages so the middle class can be safer. And that's the reason why. That's what that's all about. That's why they love it. They don't love it because they love the diversity and integration. They love it because it's driving down wages so they can get more profits for themselves. That's the way. That's why they love it. Without sounding like, we are the world. Your problem is not with the immigrants that come here. Your problem is with the establishment in your country that brings them in. That's the problem. Because they don't like you and they want to replace you with a cheaper model. That's because at some level they don't see you as human. They have no... See, this is the whole thing. You seem to have this thing that they should care. They should care more about you as a working class person in the north of England and stuff like that, English person, than they should about like Pakistani immigrants or Somalian immigrants. No, they're not. You're nothing to them. You're nothing to them. You're replaceable. You're being replaced with Pakistanis and Somalian immigrants. It's just business. Don't take it too personally. And if you find a problem with it, well, I'll call you a Nazi and you'll be subject to cancel culture and you'll never work again anywhere. And it's the sinister middle class thing. Sinister upper middle class thing is the real issue. And university professors, their jobs are all safe. They've got their tenured jobs, and people in the civil, and no wonder the civil servants all love the immigration. It'll never affect them. Never drive their wages down. And the trade unions as well. The unions all love it. And they'll sit there talking about, we are all one. Well, yeah, they're all one. In the same way, that movie East is East, where the father says to the son, "Son, why you leave Islam? In Islam, there's no black, no white, no yellow. All men equal in Islam." And there's the point, is the final part of that statement. All men are equal in Islam. Outside Islam, forget about it. And the same with these progressive woke liberals. Everyone's diverse and equal within their world. Outside their paradigm, forget about it. Forget about it. Not a political statement. I'm not issuing political manifestos. I'm just observing the psychic weather and telling you how it affects and makes me think what I see. I'm never going to see my name on a ballot box or down City Hall complaining. Nope. Because I know it won't do anything. Much better to understand it and find a way to transcend it. Because I got news for you lot. You folks who like the National Party and so on. Those immigrants are not going home. They're not leaving. So you've got to learn to accommodate them. And the best way to accommodate them is, rather than confronting them or confronting their culture, is to strengthen your own culture. And that's not moulding rosaries and saying 10 Hail Marys. Why do you think I'm so drawn to ancient sites around Ireland? Why do you think I spend so much time among megaliths? I can go to Carramore here in Sligo and point to a cairn that's 5,500 years old and say, my ancestors built that 5,500 years ago. Their DNA and their blood runs through me. That's me. That's where I belong. And that's, to me, is the only nationalism worth striving for. What the Gaelic League had in Ireland, the turn of the 1800s and the 19th century, was to strengthen the foundation of the tribe, remove the gruel, and feed it with nourishment and sustenance. And you should be doing this everywhere you are, whatever country you're in. If you're an Appalachian hillbilly, that's what you got. Nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful thing because it doesn't depend on picking a fight with anyone else. It doesn't depend on having a leadership or a council or a book to tell you what to believe. You intrinsically know it. You intrinsically feel it. There is no want. When you have no soul, when you have no foundation, what you do is you attempt to then set the demarcation lines and criteria of other people. Because you don't know who you are. When you don't know who you are, you have this desire to tell others that they shouldn't know who they are either. And therefore, you will tell people nationalism is outdated and toxic. Is it? Why? Because you don't feel it? Who put you in that position? Like, I have a huge problem with Christianity, but there's no way at all that I would ever ask for that to be banned. In fact, I would rather people have some spiritual connection. Now, for instance, let's talk about Ireland and Catholicism, right? There's something intrinsically very dark and horrible about Irish Catholicism. It's very, very dark. And that's because it's basically Roman imperialism via the Vatican attacking Irish people. So all those things of the nuns and the Magdalene laundries, they were all Roman agents attacking Irish women. The industrial schools were Christian Brothers, Roman agents, Gestapo, Jesuit Gestapo, attacking Irish boys. But then again, I look at something like folk Catholicism, and I see how lovely that is. And I love that. That's the kind of Catholicism you get in, like, New Orleans and around the Mississippi Delta in the United States, where they don't go to Mass. They might rarely pray, but they take part in the rituals, and I think it's a beautiful thing. I mean, for instance, as a pagan, I am not in the least bothered by seeing the statue of the Virgin Mary at the crossroads in rural Ireland. In fact, I quite love it, and I think it always stays. Because I know that that's rooted in something like the veneration of shrines for Hecate in the pagan world, where she would be placed at the crossroads as a protection for travellers, a protection for the journey. And so it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. I've no problem with it at all. None. People going to holy wells. And you go to a holy well here in Ireland, there might be a statue of the Virgin Mary there. It's not really the Virgin Mary, it's Minerva, the Roman version of Athena. That's what it goes back to. It goes back to very ancient pagan traditions. And folk Catholicism is very pagan. You can celebrate the feast days, Shrove Tuesday, Easter, which are all, pagan basically anyway. And Lent, time of fasting, nothing wrong with that. You don't have to set foot in one of those embassies of the Vatican Church. You don't have to subject yourself to the waffling of some paedophile at the top of the altar. You don't have to subject yourself to the excrementous conveyor belt of garbage that goes from St. Peter's Square in Rome to your local parish. You can still think in terms of the concept of Jesus as being about goodness and kindness, and that's what you want, that's good for you. I have no problem with that at all. I'm always said to people, if you're going to become a Christian, become a Catholic. Not because Catholics are better, but it's the nearest thing to paganism. And a folk Catholic, folk Catholicism. That's why it lends itself so well to things like Santeria and Santa Muerte cults. Somebody said the other day that the early Christians in Ireland were really pagans. Nah, they weren't. That's a complete myth put out by these people who promote this ridiculous Celtic church idea. The first Christians that came to Ireland would have called themselves rabbis. In fact, the apostolate, the ecclesiastical missal for Ireland refers to the Irish as the Gentiles. They were apostolized Jews, or some of them were probably full Jews from the Roman Empire. But if St. Patrick never existed, but if he did, he would have considered himself a rabbi. And the Irish as Gentiles. And ironically, it was at the Synod of Whitby that the Catholic Church absorbed the Celtic Church, that Ireland had more paganism brought to it. Well, Irish Christianity. We really don't know how long Christianity took to establish itself in Ireland. If you read my book, The Druid Code, it probably wasn't until the Middle Ages, if the Book of Ballymote is anything to go by, that they were still concerned about Druids and Vikings and Satyrs and this kind of thing. It still bothered them. And, like, that's a beautiful thing. So no one has to be an extremist. I think that's the thing, is to try and not be pulled to extremes. And to see value in something for its value rather than its label. You know what I'm saying? For its actual value. So when I see the statue of the Virgin Mary's at the crossroads in rural Ireland, I say, I like that. That's nice. It's a good tradition. It carries on from an ancient pagan tradition of protection of the crossroads, where the belief that the spiritual world and the material world meet at the crossroads in rural, and that comes into, like, that was even brought up the Robert Johnson in America with, the song "Going Down to the Crossroads," and that came again from the Scots Irish just meeting the African Americans, and it's just a beautiful thing, a beautiful, beautiful thing. Again, culture being left to organically meander and swirl, and not to have a record company saying, this is what the new Irish music sounds like, a mixture of hip-hop and trad, this nonsense, no, leave it alone, and, people in your culture will find other people and they'll develop their own thing. We're not allowing culture to, the problem is, we have no bottom-up culture anymore. It's all top-down. It's all top-down, all of it. And therefore, there's no beauty in it. And that's why you have kids posting on 80s music videos. I'm 19 now, I wish I was 19 back in 1984. Because even the kids today know that the world is gruel. This is planet gruel. There's just enough to keep them alive, but it ain't giving them any spiritual nourishment. It ain't giving them any cultural nourishment. You saw that with the Venus Project. Remember that nonsense? And yet, most of the ones who wanted to live in it were American suburbanites. Probably all the ones who are woke now. That's because they don't understand that there's other ways to live. This is why they think that all white people all over the world, even people like me who grew up in the Ballymun flats in Dublin, all have it easy. It's all white privilege. They have no idea. They have absolutely no idea, like what white people suffered in the Balkans during the Yugoslavian Civil War and so on. They think that every white person on earth had the same privileged lifestyle they had in a suburb of Seattle. Gruel. Even the heritage is gruel. And they know intrinsically, deep down inside, that they're starving. They're hungering for something richer. They may not want a banquet, but they want sustenance and knowledge and nourishment. They don't even know how to ask for it. Because the gruel of society has turned their brains to mush. It's filled them full of polemic, and it's robbed them of the ability to be a polymath. Are there any polymaths left? Do they exist? Or everyone today is a pigeonhole? They're all square pegs that go into their square holes and round pegs that go into their round holes. As the trajectory of globalization pushes all the multicolored strands of the plasticine away into a brown piece of shit. A blob. Teletubby people. The desire for sustenance is always there in the ones who want it. And that's why people like me continue to do this work. Not to be a guru, not to say this is the answer, but to say there are doors that you can walk through. There are doors that you can open. Go have a look. Don't be pigeonholed into all the options exclusively that are presented before you. Look for your own monomyth. To use the Sanskrit phrase, that your dharma, your purpose in life. You look at the Hindu concept of Brahman, that the universe, this is what we'd call like the matrix universe. It has no beginning and no end. It is separate from intellect and the material world, but yet it's an underlying field that holds it all together, from which it emanates and manifests. But it's always there, regardless of the change that happens in the material universe. Brahman remains. Brahman is always there. It is the unmanifest from which the manifest appears, and which the manifest upon destruction returns to. It's always there. It's true things like everything from satire to philosophy that reminds you of this greatness, that the faculties of the culture in which you're trapped is not the exclusive narrative which you're trapped into. That ultimately you serve your own monomyth and you are the architect of your own destiny. The French philosopher Montaigne said that even the highest king has to get off his throne to go take a shit. And that's what made philosophers like Montaigne so popular, is that there was an element of like honest wisdom in his work. An honesty. This is, the king sits there on his throne, but he just has to get out and take a shit. And that was always like, someone said to me years ago, if always imagine that person that you hate taking a shit, or is bullying you taking a shit, or, think about like all these leaders you don't like on the toilet taking a shit. They still have to do what you do. All the trappings of power and dominance upon you is reduced down to the same thing. He still has to sit on the same crapper as you. And here we are at the midpoint of 2020. The pivot point. It started out with fires in Australia. It ended up with people being wearing face masks for a pandemic that apparently ended. They're telling us infections are off the scale, but yet no one's dying. What gives? Nobody knows really right now what the future holds. You think of the year as a seesaw, and the control grid has one side of it, and the other side is empty. When you're a kid and someone's on a seesaw, and the kid went over first and sat on it, and their bum went down to the ground and the other side of the seesaw went up into the air because there was no one on it, then you got on the seesaw. And then you put your weight upon it, and it lifted the other kid on the other end of the seesaw up off the ground. Well, this is the second half of 2020. Take your seat on the seesaw. Rather than being a victim, or rather than, letting the kid have the seesaw all to themselves, you jump on it and you make sure that you add your own weight to it for the rest of this year. No matter what. Hop on. And I'll see you in the second half. Take care. And welcome back to the second hour of The Velocity of Now with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan. If you look in the description box below, you have the links to everything regarding my online presence. But however, my official website at the moment is www.mossuponstones.com. It's indeed good to be back doing these broadcasts again, and I thank you for being along and enjoying them and so on. We're trying to take them into new places, and occasionally now and again I'll do a little mini play halfway through for a bit of fun, or even commentary, or perhaps even a little bit of magic. Now, it's interesting how the decline of celebrity is mirroring the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. Even Forbes magazine recently had an article about how America's obsession with celebrity is generally changing, and the relationship that Americans have towards celebrities has begun to change. Now, I believe a lot of this had to do with the way so many of them behaved when Trump was both running for election and became elected. They could not take a neutral policy, and they could not, sit on the fence regardless of how they felt about him. They actively attacked him in a very visceral and partisan way, showing no doubt that these people are very much not in touch with the rest of us. They sit in their multi-million-dollar mansions with their servants and everything and claim they're being treated like, prisoners by Trump and the pandemic and the lockdown. It's ridiculous. At the same time, they say that everyone else has to stay home and stay inside. They are the epitome of cultural Marxism, this whole concept that the destruction of normality and what are taken as constants within Western society are reversed constantly. So therefore you have a situation where a homeless man dying in the gutter of cancer is privileged, and a multi-millionaire heiress feminist is oppressed by him. And we know this is a central tenet of critical theory. But one of the reasons it's breaking down is we can see it in celebrities. They're not getting away with things like they used to. I have astrology friends who say there's certain astrological elements to this. It's almost like predicted in the stars. I don't know enough about that, but it's definitely happening. They can't hide their hypocrisy in the same way they once could. You look at, for instance, Ellen DeGeneres. Now, there's a serious backlash against her from something as very basic as labour and human resources among her staff. Apparently, if you arrive in LA, the first two things you learn are when you get your first parking ticket and someone has a horror story about working for Ellen DeGeneres. Apparently, she has a horrible name and is a bully, nasty, and just a horrible prima donna, and yet she fosters under this mantra of be kind, and yet her own staff, you say to yourself it was one or two or three or four staff that it could be all, bullshit. But when the numbers that are hitting now is quite remarkable, especially as it's gone into a legal situation now where it's being examined by even by the labour courts and so on. And it looks really bad for these people who claim to be on the side of the oppressed. These vanguards of critical theory that you have in the celebrity world. I do believe that there's something of a curse that these people are under. You see it so many times. Celebrities who have attacked openly Trump, a lot of them have gone into meltdown and literally lost their careers for no inexplicable reason. But in the case of Ellen DeGeneres, she tried something particularly sinister, and that was her mollycoddling of George Bush Jr. At the same time, she's calling Trump a horrific monster for... She even used the word disadministration in that way, like it's like some kind of autonomous monster that rolled into town and took over without anybody's permission. They seem to forget that there are actually democratic elections held in the United States. But this mollycoddling of George Bush Jr. was particularly nauseating, and the whole public rehabilitation of him. And let's be honest, people like Bono are heavily involved in this as well. It's the sheer hypocrisy that someone who could start a war on false pretense, the weapons of mass destruction, can now be a cuddle bunny and everybody's best friend and like a granddad we all kind of love because Orange Man bad. And this is an element of this cultural Marxist critical theory where it really should be called gaslighting theory because everything is turned upside down, inverted and inside out. Now, I was looking at something the other day and I had to laugh because when 2016, when Trump got elected, Chris Stein from Blondie, and I was one of his Facebook friends, puts up a picture of Debbie Harry and Hillary Clinton, and he posts something like, "Let the resistance begin," as if the Clinton Foundation and all the globalists and the mass media who support her are somehow, this underground army. They're not mainstream. This is another part of the ridiculousness of it. And I had just mentioned, this is nauseating. Punk did not begin to, it was not about endorsing political dynasties. And Chris Stein comes on with me and says, well, what right have you to say that celebrities or famous people or successful people shouldn't be involved in politics? And my thing was that, well, in the case of the punks, you're just basically endorsing the same mainstream that you claim to have been against. He didn't answer me, of course, but one of the reasons that she was in this piece where she was with her photograph of her and Hillary Clinton together, she was saying that Trump was so offensive and kept referencing that ridiculous, grab her by the pussy comment. Now, lo and behold, here we are, three and a half years later, and Debbie Harry releases a biography. And in it she talks about this cute episode that was very charming and sweet, where David Bowie pulled out his penis unsolicited and showed it to her after she scored him some coke. Now this is about as much as a nuclear attack under the Me Too rules as you could possibly get. But she had no problem with David Bowie taking out his penis and exposing it to her after she delivered some coke, and finding it cute and funny and sweet. That's okay, I have no problem with that. But by the same token, when Donald Trump, 9 years before he was president, elected, made a comment in private using the metaphor of grab her by the pussy, and that was a Me Too moment. This is the hypocrisy of it. The hypocrisy of these celebrities is quite nauseating and sickening. And they have this almost like Stockholm syndrome, where their own bullshit supersedes any reality that they exist within. It's literally an elite caste saying that what's good for the little people does not apply to us, the celebrities, and as a result it's falling apart. You see weird things happening, and then they try to put up people who are so obviously spooks. For instance, Ricky Gervais. How anyone could think that he was a critic of Hollywood is beyond me, when he is about as Hollywood as they get. And yet some people in the alternative movement think that he's some kind of whistleblower. It's utterly ridiculous. He wouldn't even be there if he was. Now you have a situation with Tom Hanks and his wife acting very strangely during the Rona lockdown, suddenly becoming Greek citizens. Now, I don't know what's going on there for real. There's all kinds of theories. We don't know. But it's also very, very, very strange. Very strange indeed. Jim Carrey acting strange is another one that the alternative people seem to think is some kind of hero. And he's anything but. He's another one of them. And you just see the celebrity thing just dissolving. Now, a lot things like Epstein's Island seems to have a major role in that, the whole connection to Epstein. And that kettle of fish that's about to be open, or hopefully will be about to be open. But that's part of the mystique of celebrity being destroyed. The mystique of this, the mirage of some kind of greatness with these people being gone. And again, it plays into my theory that Crowley's Aeon of Horus has ended prematurely. A major part of Crowley's philosophy, magic work, and it is true, would be that the concept of every man and woman being a star, and the brighter that star glows, the more powerful their illumination is. And that's where the whole thing with the celebrity came from. Stars in their eyes, Hollywood stars. And those stars are all going out one by one, just like the stars in the night sky are going out one by one. And in some cases, and when those, remember a few months ago we had one of the many, many strange astronomical things and cosmological events and happenstances that are going on, and one of them was this stars vanishing in the sky. And as soon as that began to happen, and including Betelgeuse in the constellation of Orion dimming massively as possibly a precursor to a supernova, as the stars began to dim in the night sky, the stars of Hollywood started to lose their allure, their charisma, their glamoury. And that game is up. And I really do believe that the Aeon of Horus has ended prematurely. I don't think that Crowley anticipated two things. One was the explosion of the internet and the ability of the internet and social media to perform a kind of a spiritual role. And secondly, the resurgence of paganism and heathenism. I don't think he anticipated that. In many ways, Crowley's Thelema is at its most powerful when it's a direct challenge to Christianity. Christianity loses its power, and it's the classic thing that they're quantum coupled to one another, and it falls apart. And it's written in the stars. The stars in the sky started to fade, Beetlejuice included, at the same time. The stars in Hollywood started to lose their allure. And it's really quite comical. It's very funny to watch their implosions. Like to see someone like Sinead O'Connor becoming a Muslim because Christianity or Catholicism is misogynistic, and yet she can't attend major Islamic events in Dublin because she's a woman. This is the remarkable thing about these people, how stupid they are. How utterly stupid they are. When the lockdown first happened, we had so many of them singing Imagine, the John Lennon song, and it's one of the most cringe-worthy things you could possibly sit through. And technology is not helping either. When you see how good these face-swapping software and applications are getting, if you can do that on your phone, and it's okay. You know, if you have a large quantum supercomputer that belongs to a movie studio, the sky's the limit. You can, I was talking to somebody who's a Blake Seven fan there the other day, and I was saying there's nothing to stop Blake Seven with the original cast being relaunched as a new series, and all they have to do is they want Avon, they get Paul Darrow's face and his voice from the old show and all the rest of the cast, Servalan, and Villa and all the others, and just transfer them onto new actors that have a similar frame and body style. And you have that TV series. You could, and that's the sky's the limit regarding that. We could have new John Wayne movies, new Dirty Harry movies, anything using these face swapping applications, and that's another end of the celebrity. There's something else to that as well. I've had a few friends, mostly, well, girls love this stuff anyway. They love funny things with software. A lot of them were doing that with the face swapping app, and I have to say I found it very creepy. It just does. It doesn't work. It can be fun for like 5 seconds, but then it puts you into that sort of dissociation of the uncanny valley, where it's not, after a minute or two, it's like, oh, I don't like this. And even if she's a pretty girl, it does something to them. I think it whatever it takes, the facial features and matches them. It doesn't work for some reason. I don't know why, but as the more I watched it, it was disturbing, and because I think your subconscious levels, your subconscious mind or inner vision sees something that is it's not real, and it knows it. It knows it. What is real is, yesterday I went out with some friends to visit another friend in Drumcliff in County Sligo, and I went to the Drumcliff tea rooms. It's right beside the church, St George's Church, where William Butler Yeats, the poet, is buried. And it was my first time out in a tea room since the lockdown began, and this place is wonderful. All the food is all home cooked, all the baking is done on the premises, all the soups, everything is done on the premises, and the food is just wonderful. But yesterday I had a cheesecake that was raspberry and lemon curd, and it had a dollop of pineapple. You never get, very rare, pineapple ice cream next to it. Jesus, to say this was delicious. It was delicious in two ways. One, you're hanging out with your friends again, and two, it's just this beautiful, home baking experience. It just was like, it just reaffirmed life again and what things are about, and what they took from us, the simple pleasures, these simple little things in life is what they've taken from us. And you have the situation now in England where Boris Johnson is now saying that anyone over 50 has to be locked down. It's ridiculous. At the same day, you had, if you were to leave if you were to look at the official report, 17,000, which is ridiculous because I saw some of the aerial photographs. Others have said at 1.3 million. But whatever way, let's round that off the halfway point. Let's say 600,000 people marched through the streets of Berlin the other day to protest the face mask. And you think, wow, that's brilliant. But on the other side of the coin, the ones who are terrified, the stay-at-home, save-lives bunch, they're becoming even more entrenched. It's really weird. There's a split where half are saying, let's get back to life. Let's, get back to life. And then the other half are like, oh, you're going to kill me and kill my grandmother if we go back, if you open the pubs again, then you open the schools. And there's no middle ground. It's like so entrenched. So incredibly entrenched. There's just nothing like it. I can't, it's amazing, the extremity of the views. And no one seems to want to meet in the middle ground. So this puts the government and the bureaucrats and the other spooks in a position to manipulate easier, because they've created one more thing they've divided up, and divide and conquer and divide and rule. One more thing they've done. They've totally pissed on us that way. And it's amazing to see this division grow deeper and deeper. It's almost like a civil war at this point. It really is weird. And the thing is, they're genuinely, there are genuinely millions and millions of people, or a huge percent of the population, who are snivelling cowards. Snivelling, spineless cowards. Have no backbone. And they literally have a mentality, let's stay inside and nothing bad will ever happen again. And the way they'll condescendingly attack people who go to the beach. But what about things like much more people are killed in road accidents? Let's ban cars. Let's ban roads. Make everyone walk everywhere ever again. I mean, they'll go, that's ridiculous. But the same ones will say, for a much lesser chance of being killed by coronavirus, will say, keep the lockdown going, please. It's just bizarre. It's just utterly bizarre. And it has to be. It's almost like it's critical theory from the Frankfurt School, stage 2. And stage 1 was political correctness and the whole idea that, oppression is the fuel of society, and you create, even if they're in the majority and have all the power, you make them oppressed, make them believe they're oppressed, you treat them as if they're oppressed, and it's the idea to gaslight and flip reality. Well, it seems to be that they've now moved into things like pandemics. A few people have pulled out videos of mine and things that I said as far back as 2011, which is pretty funny, when I said they'll want a global lockdown to bring in a police state, and the chances are they might do something like a pandemic. And I was saying that like a decade ago, and a few times I said it, and I have to be honest with you, that would have been the least one that I would have thought would have happened. I thought the one that would have happened would be a global catastrophe, like a massive, an EMP or something like that. But they're getting all their eggs done in one basket with this thing. They're getting it done. They're getting what they want. They terrified the shite out of people for decades with the threat of nuclear war, and they'd watch films like The Day After. And what was that horrible cartoon, When the Wind Blows? I mean, horrible in it's so depressing and disturbing. When the Wind Blows, from the 80s, about the elderly couple who are, and it's actually, it reminds me so much of the Rona. These people who think that they're going to go back to their jobs that don't exist anymore, this cognitive dissonance types. Oh, we just stay indoors for another month or two, my job will be there, and then go back, and then it'll be safe. These types, and that cartoon film, When the Wind Blows, the elderly English couple, they're like a normal middle class couple, they try to continue on with life as it was, and like, I'll go make a nice cup of tea. Where's the gas? There's no gas on. The dependency of middle class living was taken from them piecemeal. And you see that with so many people in the Rona thing. With this case, they're almost like their own nuclear bomb. They're the ones choosing to disenfranchise themselves from life. They're the ones choosing to live in terror. And some of the videos you've seen, like that one in California of the lady on the beach, she's speaking Spanish, and then this woman comes over with a tape measure screaming, and her husband has to carry her away. It's people like you, and she's nowhere near her. Just a complete psychiatric episode. And it turns out that lady was a nurse. And then I see another video the other day of a guy in Melbourne smashing a counter I think it's a coffee shop, because the guy behind the counter didn't have a mask. And he smashes the glass container, the glass display cabinet. It's like the Trump derangement syndrome migrated over to Corona or COVID derangement syndrome, which tells me that there is a sizable proportion of society in the West today who have a psychiatric state. They're barely sane. They're teetering on the edge of a psychiatric episode. And it's usually expressed through hysteria and rage, and the need to control others. There's no win in that for those people. The fundamental root of why that psychiatric state exists if that's not addressed at the root cause, it will always maintain and sustain itself, and that's why it migrates across from something like Trump derangement syndrome to, social distancing, psychiatric outbursts, histrionic disorder, whatever you want to call it. One of the intriguing aspects of this whole COVID-19 experience is how many people now adore and trust governments unconditionally. There's no bad in the world. There's no bad people running the world. Governments are all right, they're all great, and so are corporations, and the ones most likely to be this are the left-wing people. The lefties. Oh, the lefties love it. They absolutely adore it. They have no problem with the control structure. They're completely and totally delighted to be under control. But then again, isn't that what left-wing is anyway? But I want to read this to you. This was doing the rounds, this on social media, and a relative of mine who was a new age inclined, and I saw it on a few other kind of new agey people things that was passed around, and it was like, if you could imagine Bill Gates, dressed like a yurt rapist, this is the image that this thing conjures up in my head. I don't know who it is. It was an anonymous author, but I'll read it to you. It's hilarious. I'll try to be as patronizing as possible. Dear spiritual friends, a few important talking points to note here. Fictional conspiracy theories such as QAnon and conspiracy theories about the imaginary quote-unquote deep state are cooked up by the far right, aka alt-right, and weaponized to distract attention from the actually existing geopolitical strategic games playing, and also the really existing empire building on the part of the fascists. This is part of the very purpose that these conspiracy theories, along with hashtag fake news stories, are designed for. Okay, so there's no such thing as the deep state, right? There's no Bilderbergs, there's no Trilateral Committee, there's no Council on Foreign Relations, but there are fascists. Where are they? I can't see them. Could someone point me out the fascists to me? No, I don't see them. I'm not aware of fascists anywhere in the world in power at the moment. But apparently, in this minds of these New Agers, there are fascists running the world, but there's no deep state. Even though the deep state is in your face and everywhere, but that doesn't exist. Back to my yurt rapist voice. Spiritual people are particularly susceptible to this because they are perceived as high on empathy and low on boundaries, and therefore seen as easy to turn and manipulate. So what they're saying is that spiritual people are stupid, okay? That's a nice way of saying spiritual people are stupid. It's like the old joke, I'm a spiritual person. And someone says, well, demons are spiritual, be more specific. But the whole thing is that we're falling for it. And there seems to be kind of a rescue thing, a kind of a rescue mission thing going on with New Agers who want to help their friends who are believing the conspiracy about the Rona and help them recover. Because they're empathic. Back to the yurt rapist voice. An effective way to defeat one's opponent is to get them to chase after imaginary enemies in order to weaken them, confuse them, control them, and cover up one's really existing nefarious behavior. So the left don't do that with statues, right? They attack statues for what? What's the reason? What are they chasing statues for? What did the statue of the Little Mermaid in Copenhagen do? The ones who have imaginary enemies are the left. It's an old strategy. Machiavellian and Sun Tzu, The Art of War, described it, and it's being used by abusers everywhere to get their victims to trauma bond with them.
Many intelligence agencies around the world are trained in such techniques, but you trust this thing written by an anonymous New Ager. The Overtron window has shifted to the right over the last 30 years. I don't even know what the Overtron window is. Or so folks make mistakes centrist for leftists and far right for moderate right. No, it's not. It's the other way around, you stupid fuck. It's the other way around. Anyone who's even slightly centrist is now made extreme, is now called extreme right wing. Of course, the far-right strategy has been to encourage and capitalize on the shift in the Overtron window. This is why, for instance, in the US, the far-right have been able to rebrand themselves as alt-right and largely come across as acceptable to many historical centralist voters. That's because the left is completely insane. You're attacking statues. Sane people are seeing you act like lunatics. This is why they're not supporting you anymore. The left has gone completely bonkers. The current people that you call alt-right are actually JFK liberals, by the way. The left has gone insane. This is unbelievable gaslighting, this. People who are disenchanted with the political centre, disenchanted with identity politics, or disenchanted... Well, I'm disenchanted with identity politics, it's bollocks. I'm disenchanted with capitalism or neoliberalism, would in the past have gravitated to the moderate left. Far left or centre right, but these days the far right have extensive recruitment and disinformation campaigns to funnel those disenchanted with capitalism, centrism, identity politics, and neoliberalism towards this new brand of fascism. Where's the fascism? What you call fascism was JFK liberalism. You lefties have gone so psychotically far to the left. That's the real issue. You have fucking gone bonkers. And anyone who's not bonkers is now moved to the centre. And you're now calling the centre extreme fascism, when that centre is probably JFK. No, it is JFK liberalism. Part of the fascist strategy is to misguide people into thinking the centrist neoliberal policies that trouble them are far leftist policies, often branding them communist or socialist plots. That's because they are. But they're called critical theory and cultural Marxism now. To destroy our rights and dreams. Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. That's why you're locked at home over a flu. This is displayed by the current rhetoric of the Antifa being far-left violent rioters, while in reality Antifa, that's really weird how they hyphenate it, Antifa simply means against fascism. So all the gun-wielding, burning down Seattle, wrecking cities, that wasn't violent? Oh, that's fascinating. So what was it that was like, cuddles, Means... Antifa simply means against fascism and supported by many different political views, not least all those who support centrist positions, Democrats and Republicans, Labour and Conservative included, since all democracies are inherently anti-fascism and pro-freedom of speech. Are they? Hold on a second. That's a very interesting take there, because the majority of anyone who was fascist who actually got into power was elected into power. So how can you say they're anti-democratic? That's because you're losing elections all over the world. No one voted for Corbyn because that's bonkers. No one voted for Hillary Clinton because it's bonkers. You're losing elections. If anyone is anti-democratic, it's the left, because the democracy has no place for you. You cannot win elections. The far right then pretend to be rebels against capitalism, while in fact standing for even more extreme and brutal forms of enforced state capitalism. Now hold on a second, that's actually true. The vast majority of right-wing people I know are pro-small business and against corporatism. The ones who support the corporatisms are the likes of the lefties. They love Steve Jobs and Apple. They love Microsoft and Zero, Bill Gates and all this other bullshit that goes with him. They love these massive corporations, the lefties. Where the people who are centrist, what you calling fascists, they want to see more business, small business flourish. Spreading disinformation and fictional conspiracy theories through mechanized AI, artificial, oh, here we go, the Russians again, algorithms to lure alternative cultural luminaries, free thinkers, intellectuals, people engaged in the human potential movement, and the healthy living enthusiasts, along with centrist, central leftist folk, over the far-right dogma, has been part and parcel of far-right and fascism, e.g. Ku Klux Klan. Do you know any Klan people? Have you ever seen any Klan members with any power in the world? Even among the right, the Klan don't have any power. Neo-Nazis, no, the likes. Okay, let's talk about who's a neo-Nazi. Say Tommy Robinson. He has almost no power. White supremacists. Only white supremacists I know, like David Duke and people like that. Again, no power. Britain First, no power. British National Party, no power. English Defence League, no power. Playbook for a long time. These groups have no power. Zero. None. Zero. Well, extreme leftist groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, who admit that they're communist trained, can smash up city centres and they don't even get arrested. And they claim they have no power. The ones who can actually destroy a city and not get arrested are the ones claiming they have no power. And it's the fascists who don't exist and don't have any power are the ones that they're claiming. And this is gaslighting on a monumental level. The fascist strategy is to pose as a rebel against the system and get leftists and hippie types to attack each other and attack civil rights society in the West, thinking that they are fighting a noble fight against George Soros, Bill Gates, pedophilia, satanic rituals, Hollywood elite, the cabal of major anti-Semitism conspiracy, and of course the imaginary deep state. So here's the lefties praising George Soros, Bill Gates, saying that pedophilia is not wrong, that, well, I don't know about satanic rituals, I don't even think they exist. Hollywood elite must be worshipped no matter what, and I've never even heard of the cabal, I don't know what they're talking about there. The purpose in these disinformation campaigns and conspiracy theories are to divide people against each other, divide the working class and the middle class. What? Blame immigrants and people that are different to us. No, they're blaming the globalists, not the immigrants. Non-white, non-Christian, for example. What? Massively undermined and undervalued democratic systems in the US, UK, and Europe. You see, they believe that democracy is undermined when they don't get elected. That's what they think. They think there's no democracy in America because they lose elections. There's no democracy in the UK because they lose elections. There's no democracy in Europe because they lose elections. They think that democracy is now corrupt because they're undermined because no sane person would vote for these motherfuckers. And forward the agenda of white supremacy and Christian. I don't know anyone who forwards white supremacy and Christian fundamentalism. That's really an American thing. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Also, one of the far-right's current strategy is to actively rebrand themselves as spiritual teachers or new paradigm influencers. Some of these right-wing new paradigm influencers around today share some of the same beliefs as the fascists and Nazis from the 1920s and 30s. Oh my God! But use a cover identity as new teachers, spiritual teachers, coaches, and new paradigm influencers to forward the agenda and get ingress in leftist and alternative circle cultures. I've not met anyone like this. Not one person. Not one have I met like this. Now, they talk about the deep state being imaginary, but they're creating completely imaginary neo-Nazi yurt rapists that don't exist. Please don't dismiss this message. Please understand that I care about you. Oh, he really does. Enough to want to see the route you're going down by supporting QAnon and following the Great Awakening, Drain the Swamp, and 5D. It may be, in some areas, have a legitimate cause for concern, but supporting fascists and disempowerment's our cause. Please be a part of the solution instead of following these paths of blaming big names, celebrities, and business leaders. Wow, we're supposed to love business leaders now, you lefties. Just listen to that. lefties telling you to worship celebrities and business leaders. And large ideas, globalization in government. Sort of lefties telling you to worship globalists, celebrities and business leaders, and if you don't, you're a fascist conspiracy theorist. And then finger pointing at your friends and acquaintances that you were asleep or blind or sheeple to the truth. As we offer legitimate and balanced challenges to the nonsense, fake news we see posted kindly take. I mean, how many left-wing news sites have been shut down, or left-wing commentators have had their accounts removed from YouTube and everywhere else? Zero. And Stefan Molyneux has gone from YouTube, Alex Jones, David Icke, on and on, all removed from YouTube, and yet none of them. And you see, this is what's terrifying them. And there's little hearts posted all over this. Reconsider your position and who you're aligned with. Please come back to a cleaner state of reality. Can you believe this? Please be a part of the solution and reconsider your part in contributing towards racism, fascism, race hate, and cultural disunity. Oh my God. I welcome your comments and feedbacks from all sides of the debate. I do not welcome anyone being rude to me, although you've just spent time dehumanizing anyone who has an opinion that isn't, in favor of worshipping celebrities and, corporate leaders. Please remain polite. Might trigger them. And type as you would if you were face to face rather than hidden behind the screen. You mean like you're hiding behind the screen? And then finishes with, please feel free to unfriend me. And if you feel that strongly about my thoughts and ideas, or knowledgeable or insight, with love and hope, little heart there, for the population and a greener one for our kids. It's absolutely sickening. Absolutely sickening. And I'm seeing this more and more. They're passing around these kind of lefty new age things that everyone's a fascist if you're not on the green side of the left. And to see lefties today, people who came from working class backgrounds, working class parts of the world, now telling their children to worship Bill Gates, worship corporate leaders, worship globalization. Now, the strictest term and definition of fascism is control by corporations. That's its original term. Corporate control of society. And yet these lefties who claim they're fighting against corporatism, against fascism, are actually endorsing the initial and fundamental meaning of the term fascism. They want Bill Gates to rule the world. They do not want democracy to rule it. And yet they call the others fascist when they are the original fascists themselves. And I'm seeing it all over. I'm seeing, let's get your friends and relieve them from this. Let's help them. My friends have conspiracy problems. I want to help them. I want to really help them. We could get out of that and get back to worshipping Bill Gates. Can you only imagine the folk music of the future? You know the way, like, the folk music of the past, whether it was like Woody Guthrie or Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger, they sung about civil rights and wonderful things like, helping the poor and union strikes and stuff like that. Even, Bruce Springsteen, they closing down the textile mill, the union is on strike. This kind of thing, right? What if you were to have that music now today with the same lefties, there'd be things like, they tried to take away my right to marry a 9-year-old boy. Love is love, the fascists tried to stop me. They came into our town and took away all the soy and told us we would have to eat high protein. My 9-year-old husband, love is love. I castrated him and made him eat that soy. The evil man wouldn't let me force my 8-year-old daughter to have a sex change. And this is how the fascists rule the world. Oh yeah. My wife, she brought home another man. And it broke my heart because she wouldn't have sex with him. I'm a soy boy cuckold, and I know what I need. I gotta be open and diverse. When your woman stops dyeing her hair purple, when she no longer weighs 600 pounds, when you find out that she never was a man and always was a woman too, you know the fascists have arrived in your town. John, he was 39 years old. He fell in love with little P.P. George, who was 9. All they wanted to do was get married and have children, 'cause love is love. But the fascists and the Trump said, not on our time. And that's literally what, if you were to take the left today, that's what the lyrics would be like. That's what the lyrics would be like if you were to take the left protest songs of the 60s and 70s, the 50s, 60s and 70s, and you know, transfer them to today. The left would be singing about things like that. They'd be singing about things like that. You didn't safe distance from me. What hope is there in this world when Bill Gates can control us completely? I love my Microsoft. I love my corporations completely controlling me. But the man says small business must return. Oh, small businesses are evil. They're really evil to the world. We need Amazon and Netflix and IKEA too. I hate my store in town because they don't have dresses in the men's department. We're living in a hell, me and you. I mean, that's literally what they'd be like. That's literally what they'd be like. If you were to transfer the same, if folk music existed today, that's the songs they'd be singing, the lefties. I broke my father's heart because I didn't transition before I was 10. I stayed a boy and I became a man. But now I'm full of regret and hurt that my daddy had to die with a son who wasn't a girl but was a boy. Anyway, that's all on the philosophy of now for this week in this incredibly absurd world. Thank you for being there, for helping keeping me sane, and I'll see you next time on the Velocity of Now with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan. Oh yeah, I'm an achiever, yes I am, because I dyed my hair purple. Get me off this fucking planet!